This video is aimed at advanced developers and it discusses the onSynchronize events, both client-side and server-side, that are fired when a dialog component is opened up in a window and it has been previously opened, so it's being synchronized as opposed to initialized. So first let's take a look at this simple dialog component over here. You can see that in the dialog we've got two controls, control 1 and control 2. For the dialog we've also defined two arguments. So let's go and look at our arguments. We've defined dialog arg1 and dialog arg2, and we've given both of them a default value. And then for these two controls we've specified that the default value for control 1 is the value of dialog arg1. So you can see we've got equals and then colon dialog arg1, and then we've used equals colon dialog arg2, and this is explained in the help text over there. So when we go ahead now and we run this dialog, we can see that we see the default values for those two arguments filled in as the default value for these two controls on the dialog. So now let's go to a grid component that we've defined over here. Sorry, I clicked the wrong button there. Look at this grid component, and if we look at the grid component, we see we have a button here, and this button is opening up the dialog component that we defined, and we haven't chosen any of the special options that you could choose to automatically populate controls on the dialog. So we didn't choose any of these options over here. So this is just a vanilla action that is opening up the dialog component, and you can see here that basically what we've done is we've said that this dialog that we're opening has two arguments, dialog arg1 and dialog arg2, and we're going to bind those two arguments to fields from the current row in the grid. So basically we're going to bind dialog arg1 to the state field and dialog arg2 to the last name field. And then here's the most important point about this, is that we've said use cached UX component. So if you read the help over here, you can see that what this is saying is that the first time that you click the button to open the dialog, it's going to open up in a window, and then when you close the window down, the next time you click the button to reopen the window, instead of re-executing the dialog from scratch, it's going to use the cached version of the dialog and just redisplay the window that had previously been hidden. And since we're just redisplaying the window that was previously hidden, the onDialogInitialize event is not going to fire. Instead, it's only going to be the client-side onSynchronizeDialog event that fires, and then also now the new optional server-side onSynchronizeDialog event that will also fire. So let's actually take a look at this now in practice and see how this all works. So now when I go ahead now and click working preview now, so I click this button now, this is the first time that the dialog is open, so it's going to take a little bit longer than it would for the second time, but you can see there the dialog is opened. The two arguments that the dialog defined got bound to the fields in the current row, so you can see that the dialog now, instead of saying default value, is now saying New York and then Feldstein. So now when I close this down now and go to another row and click the button, the dialog opens up instantaneously because it's using the cached version. But you can see now that these two controls, which were bound to arguments, have now been updated to reflect the value in these rows in the row that we were focused on. So let's go take a look now at the onSynchronize events that made this all happen. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video. So we're continuing now our discussion about the synchronize events, and let's go back now to the dialog and look at how this all happens. So first I'm going to go to the client-side events, and you can see there's an event called onSynchronizeDialog, and this event is fired when the dialog window is synchronized. So I'm going to just simply go here and put in an alert over there, and then I'm going to go to my server-side events, and you can see there's an event here called onSynchronize, and I'm going to just say exit function. So I'm going to turn off the functionality that this event performs. So we'll go back now to our grid, and we'll run it. So the first time we click this button, the dialog opens up and the controls are set correctly now, because the dialog has been initialized to those arguments. But now when we close this window down and we open up, we click the button again now, so we're going to be reopening the previously cached dialog. So we click the button, we can see that our client-side onSynchronize event happens, but there's no code there to actually do anything. So then the dialog window gets shown, but you can see that the dialog window is still showing the initial values that it had when it was opened up the first time, because the onSynchronize event is actually not doing anything. So in theory it would be possible to reset these two control values by looking at data that gets passed into the client-side onSynchronize event, because if we go back to the dialog now, we can see that in the client-side onSynchronize event that what gets passed into this event is the synchronized type, which in this case there is no special synchronized type here, and then object, which is a JSON object with all of the information that was retrieved from the grid. But it's pretty complicated to parse this object and figure out how to update the fields. So we've also got a so I'm going to comment this out now, and now go to my server-side code, which I previously commented out. And what I'm going to do in my server-side code here is say that that this server-side code is going to compute some JavaScript to update those two controls, control 1 and control 2, and it's going to look at e.arguments. So e.arguments are the arguments that were defined for this dialog component, but Alpha 5 is going to automatically refresh the value of the dialog arguments in the callback. So let's go now and put in a debug1 statement over here to see what's actually happening during the life cycle of the event. So I'm going to go back now to my grid and then run it. So now I click the button, say on this row, so the value of arg1 and arg2 in the dialog are being set respectively to main and mesner. So now I'm going to close this down, and now when I click this button again now, because we're opening up a cached dialog, we click the button, the client-side event fires, and then the server-side event also fires. So here we are in the server-side onSynchronizeDialog event, and if we go look inside E, we can see E dot arguments. Sorry, let me pause now because we're running out of time, and I'll pick this up in the next video. So we're continuing our discussion now on the dialog components synchronize events, both their client-side and server-side events. So let's go there and click, say, this button now on Larry Eagle in Arizona. So here is our server-side event, our onSynchronize server-side event firing. And if we look inside E, we'll see that arguments now, and let's go to, say, arguments 1.data contains Arizona, and e.arguments 2.data contains Eagle. So what has happened behind the scenes is that on the Ajax callback that fires for the onSynchronize server-side event, what's happened is that Alpha 5 has automatically refreshed the values in these arguments, and they are now available to me to use in my event handler. So when the dialog was initially opened, these two arguments were set to Evan Feldstein, so New York and Feldstein, because that was the original row that we clicked on to open the dialog for the very first time. But now that we're reopening the dialog, the synchronize event is firing, and the synchronize event has automatically synchronized the arguments as well. So now that I have the new values in the arguments, my code here can go ahead and create the JavaScript necessary to update those two controls. So if we go and look at the dialog here, we can see that the code that we executed was the Dialogs set value method, and we set the value to the value in argument 1 and argument 2. So the ability to execute server-side code in the onSynchronize event is very powerful, because it means you can continue to use cached dialogs and get the performance benefit of reopening a cached dialog as opposed to executing the dialog from scratch, but still get the ability to call a synchronize event when the dialog is opened, and have all of the arguments that are defined in the component be automatically refreshed to the new values. So I hope you found this interesting. Thanks very much.